Well, then you can make good financial decisions. If you need to buy a piece of equipment or whatever, you know where you're at, you know that you want to save up because it's a $10,000 piece of equipment. You're going to have to save $1,000 for the next month so you don't have to put it on credit, or you just kind of know where you're at and you can make good financial decisions with, just with that part.
Welcome back to the Squeaky Shoes Media Small Business Podcast. Today we have Shannon Nielsen on with us. She is fantastic. Shannon grew up in a small town on her family's farm where she learned the value of hard work early on. Her mom was an accounting professor, and that's where Shannon first discovered her love for numbers and helping people find financial security. These days, she runs her own business from Arizona, working remotely while traveling with her husband. When she's not digging into spreadsheets or bookkeeping or books or whatever else financially, she's probably exploring the outdoors or coaching junior high and high school basketball, which she loves just as much as bookkeeping. Shannon is the founder of Streamline Financial, a bookkeeping company that helps small business owners get a handle on their finances without all the stress. Thank you for being here, Shannon. We love that you're here. So,
hey, I'm happy to be here.
Quick question before we get started. Other than your mom being an accounting professor, what drove you to doing bookkeeping for small businesses? Like, what is it that you love about that?
So I've worked in a lot of small businesses and just realized the need for somebody to care about the books and the numbers. Because a lot of times small business owners, they care about what they're doing, but they're not as versed in making sure their numbers work and that they are actually making money. And so just seeing a lot of these small business owners that, they love what they're doing, but they have no idea if they're even making any money. And so I realized there was just a need to help the small business guy or girl.
Awesome. So to start out, our first question, we're just going to run through a couple of questions that are typical questions that small businesses may ask or things that they may not think about that we want to bring up in order to help them better understand how to financially organize themselves and help them track and care for their business better. So first question, if someone is just starting a business or freelancing, what are the very first financial habits you'd recommend putting in place, even if they're not ready to hire a bookkeeper like you just yet?
The best advice I can give is to keep personal and business separate. So if that means you have to even open, if you say you don't have an EIN yet, just open a separate bank account and run everything through that bank. And you can transfer money back and forth, but the best thing I can say is keeping your expenses separate from your personal. Tracking and documenting all receipts. That's the biggest thing and then also setting aside some money for taxes, because especially as a small business owner, everything's just going to flow through your personal taxes. And that's going to be taxed as self-employment tax, which is a higher tax. And we'll go into that a little bit later. But setting up a savings account to put aside tax money so that next year when you file taxes, you're not going, holy cow, you're ready for it.
I can attest to that one because I did that the first year and that was not smart. I mean, I did not do that the first year. I guess I should correct that. I did not do that and it was a little bit of a shock because I didn't, it was something that wasn't even on my radar, which is partially why we wanted to bring you in, right? There's so many things.
Right.
When you're starting a business, nobody trains you for that. Nobody gives you a checklist and says, these are the things you need to make sure you do. And that was one of the big ones, was the financial side. I really didn't think about taxes. It's like, well, I'm just making money and trying to survive. And then you get to the end of the year, it's like, oh yeah, there's that thing. Because when you're so used to having it come out of your paycheck, it's just not something that's even in your head.
It's automatic.
Yeah, exactly. And why is it, following up on that, why is it so important to keep personal and business finances separate? And what kinds of problems come up? I mean, you sort of touched on it a little bit, but what kinds of problems can come up if you don't keep them separate? What is the reason for keeping them separate?
Well, first of all, you look like a real business. And so you're going to have to file a tax return. And even if you're just, an LLC, it also pierces the corporation coverage that if somebody says, I'm going to sue you and the IRS audits you and those are commingled, they might not recognize you as a real business, and therefore you can open up your personal to lawsuits or, things like that. So it's a layer of protection that you have everything separate, because then it protects you, and the IRS will recognize you as a business because you can show these are all business expenses, and I have documentation showing that, and this is all my personal stuff that are totally separate. And so it's just a layer of protection. And then, later on, as your business grows, you can show a track record of good financial history. And at some point, you probably want to sell your business. Most people build a business because later in life they want to retire or sell it. It'll also show that good track record of, this is my bookkeeping from the start,
Right.
And so it can show a history of growth and net revenue and things like that. So it's just a really good idea to keep them separate.
How do you keep track? How do you keep track of receipts and things like that? I mean, that it can feel overwhelming, and I understand that, but what do you have any tips for that? Like what would you suggest? What kinds of receipts do we need to keep everything? How long do you keep them? Kind of what along those lines, what would you suggest?
So keeping it separate is important. So I would open a bank account from the very start, and then tracking everything. If you go get gas in your car, take a picture of that receipt. You can have a QuickBooks app on your phone that will actually upload right into your QuickBooks account. And if your bank account is connected through QuickBooks, it will match that receipt. And so with AI and technology these days, there's honestly really no excuse to not be, because we just have so many things that we can do on our phones as we're out traveling and documenting. If you go to take someone to lunch for a business meeting, it's not a full write-off, but you can use it. It's a 50% write-off. I mean, the IRS changes the rules every year, and I'm not a tax guru, but I do know that you can take people out to lunch, but you have to document. You have to have the actual itemized receipt, not the one the credit card is on, but actually the itemized of the stuff. And then you have to put just write on the receipt who you took and what it was for. And then you upload that as well. And that will just help so that the IRS doesn't come back and say, no, you're just feeding your family.
Right.
You're going out to dinner every night and trying to run it through as a business expense. You actually have a documentation saying, no, look, I took, Sally Joe Plumber to lunch to try to get business from them. And here's the receipt showing that, here's the date, documentation. And so it's just super important to document everything. And like I said, take a picture of your phone. I have people that will just take a picture of a check and send it to me so that they can have me do that part. Uploading receipts. I have one business owner that just added me on his Amazon account. He's a landscaper, and so he buys lots of supplies through Amazon.
Yeah.
So he just added me on his business account so that I can go in when I see the transaction, I can just download that right to his QuickBooks.
Smart.
So just with technology, there's just so many awesome ways to keep us organized that's part of the reason the IRS is like, no, there's no excuse to not be organized. So.
Right. Unless you're, slightly ADHD, and then that's my excuse.
Come on. I have a tax guy that says every year he has one person that just brings him a shoebox full of receipts and says, here you go. And so that's why I've partnered with him on a lot of things, just so that I can be the one that keeps those organized throughout the year instead of a shoebox full of a year's worth of receipts.
Okay, next question. What is the best way to set up a business bank account, and what should I be looking for when choosing one as a small business owner? Is there anything specific, any type of business account? What do you see that you think is best? Okay,
so as a small business owner, you're probably just trying to get your feet wet, making sure you get some money in. But like I said, from the start, it's super important to set up that business account. If you have an EIN, you're going to take that. It's called an SS4. It's the form that you fill out to get that number. You're going to take that and your articles of incorporation, and you're going to go to the bank and open the bank account with those things. And then it's recognized as, not just Shannon Nielsen, it's recognized as Streamline Financial. So then people can write checks to me at Streamline Financial or Zelle or whatever it is, and it'll come straight to my bank account. And that's what I connect to my QuickBooks. There's a couple things that I would suggest. Obviously, we want to try to get free accounts because, we don't ever want to pay fees for anything if we can possibly make it that way. And I'll be honest, I love credit unions for my personal banking, but I do not love them for business. You don't have the opportunity on most credit unions that I've worked with. They don't do Zelle for business. And in this day and age, how many times do we Zelle people?
Yep.
All the time. And so, if you have a contractor you're going to pay, or someone who did some contract labor for you, you can just Zelle them, and then you can put the memo in what it's for. But I've seen that a lot of the credit unions that some of my clients work with, they don't have that option for their business account. So then it becomes a transfer to personal, and then personal, and it just becomes
messy,
very muddy.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you my two favorite that I've worked with so far. Chase is by far my favorite bank account for business. They don't have a lot of like earn interest, things like that, unless you're like way higher and, can afford to keep $100,000 in your account. But from a bookkeeping standpoint, as well as the opportunity to just take pictures of your checks and deposit them, or Zelle for business, or, things like that. I have a couple restoration companies that I work with that they still get actual physical paper checks from the insurance companies. And so they'll go and deposit 10 or 12 checks at a time. Well, that transaction will only come in as the bulk deposit in their QuickBooks. So I can then log into their Chase account and I can see every single check and match it to that deposit. And so it's just the clarity that a bookkeeper gets. It's just so much better. My second favorite is Bank of America, because they're pretty similar. And so those are two things that I would say is find a good business bank that will do Zelle for business, that, as a bookkeeper, you can log in, or you can say, what did I do here? What was this transaction for? I can see checks they wrote as well as those deposits. And so there's just a lot more clear cut business minded stuff. Also, their statements go back forever. I don't know that there's any cleanup that I've done that I haven't been able to go back at least 5 years and see the statements in their account. I may not be able to download the transactions, but I can see the statements to see what happened. And so those are a couple things. I don't love the statements in credit unions either, because they're all commingled with every account that you have. They're not separate statements. So yeah, sorry, it's kind of a tangent, but probably Chase or Bank of America have been my favorite.
So with those, is there an option to then allow your bookkeeper to sign in as like a view only, or
Yep.
I did not know that. Look at that. I'm learning something too.
Which is so nice, because I can log into every one of my clients' accounts, and I can't do anything with their money, but I can get the information that I need to help them keep their books straight.
Which is awesome.
And then they don't have to send me pictures, and they don't have to tell me, hey, by the way, I did this, I can go in and look at it myself.
And as a business owner where you're doing 5,000 things every day, which you understand because you've owned multiple businesses with your husband, it is anything you can do to not have to do something is huge. Right. I mean, time is money. Let's be honest. You're good at what you do, and I'm good at what I do. And so let's share the talent, Yeah, no kidding. So building off of that a little bit, what is a simple weekly or monthly routine you recommend for staying financially organized? You talked about taking pictures every time you purchase something, making sure you write down who it was with, what it was for. But are there any other routines that you would suggest if someone's trying to do this by themselves? Obviously, we hope they get to a point where they can financially afford someone like you, right? But if they're just starting out, they're bootstrapping everything, they have to be very careful where they put their money. What is a way that some routines they can build to create healthy financial habits so that when they do hire someone like you, you're not having to go back 5 years to clean things up, at least not as much? Honestly, most people know spreadsheets, like there's, Google Sheets or Excel. I would say just create a spreadsheet with a column for income and maybe document who it's for. If you it depends on how much in the weeds you want to get. If you just want to say this week I made $5,000 and just put income 5,000, but you want to track all those expenses so that maybe I would suggest at least monthly reviewing your numbers. And so you can't review those numbers if you're a month behind on getting those in. And as a business owner, if you're tracking all that stuff, am I billing correctly? Am I caught up on my billing? Am I charging enough for my services or my product? And so just knowing your numbers is the best thing that you can do, especially as a small business owner, because you're not going to have a ton of income in the beginning usually. Yeah. And so just tracking those numbers. You should always know, you got to know your nut. You got to know what your expenses are going to be that you're going to have to pay every month. And then
price accordingly, but you don't know how to do that if you're not tracking your numbers.
Exactly.
So keeping up to date on, if you go spend $50 on gas, okay, who spends $50 on gas? If you go spend $100 on gas, you go in and you save fuel, $100. And then if you also categorize like those basic things, like I paid for my job software, it was $25 this month. I paid for this. You're like me as a bookkeeper, I can go in and I can take those transactions from all the bookkeeping columns or the software columns and enter those in. All the fuel expense, enter that in. Job supplies, enter that in, because they're already categorized for me. And so it's just knowing your numbers and setting up a quick spreadsheet with some of your basic things, an income versus expense column that you can kind of see at the end of each week. I made $5,000, but I spent $4,000. Is that a good profit margin for what I'm doing?
Right.
So
that has actually
been just tracking it on a spreadsheet.
That's actually been huge for me. I didn't understand that totally when I started either. I mean, everybody I think subconsciously understands you really want to make more than you spend, right? But the actual process of writing it down so that you can see that has been something I've created new iterations probably every 6 months, trying to figure out how to track that. And it's been really interesting to see, because I thought I was charging so much. That's always been a weakness of mine, is charging people. I have a hard time charging people. It's like, I'm not worth that much. But when I realize how much effort goes into it, how many hours goes into things, how much I'm paying for tools to make these things possible for my clients, then I start realizing, I really, this is worth this. This is worth enough for me to charge, maybe even more than I'm charging now. And the more I charge, the better I can serve my clients too, to a point, right?
Exactly.
There's a balance either direction, but
right.
I would second that, because that has been, I'm not perfect at it, and I am not a bookkeeper, but I have found some ways that have helped. And I think that has made a huge difference. I know that has made a huge difference for me in my business and understanding the flow of the cash, right? The cash flow between income and,
well, then you can make good financial decisions. If you need to buy a piece of equipment or whatever, you know where you're at, that you want to save up because it's a $10,000 piece of equipment. You're going to have to save $1,000 for the next month, so you don't have to put it on credit, or you just kind of know where you're at, and you can make good financial decisions with, just with that part.
Right. And as part of this, we have actually a free template for tracking finances that we're going to include. Just click the link in the bio. You can download that tracker. It's built to categorize and total everything up for you. So all you have to do is go in and put it on a line. It'll do that for you. And then you can either hand it off to your tax person, your bookkeeper, or do it all yourself at the end of the year. It just helps keep things organized as you're going. So thank you. Next question. Are there any common money management mistakes, other than what we just talked about, right, that you see freelancers or small business owners making in the early stages? Not tracking your finances is huge. And that one's bit me so many times. But are there any other things that you've seen that people make mistakes either because they just don't know that they're supposed to do certain things, or they just feel like they don't have time and it bites them later? Any other mistakes that you see that are easy fixes or things you'd suggest to help with that?
So one is just not saving for taxes. Mm-hmm. That's a huge one. You've got to put that money aside and save for taxes. But another thing I've seen, especially with sometimes small business owners that do grow quickly, they haven't set up their processes and their procedures, which even as a single solopreneur, entrepreneur, whatever, you still need processes for how you do things in your business. And so if you don't have those things set up, and as you grow, your company's probably going to crumble because, if it's not built on a good foundation, what happens, right?
And you can't do everything when you grow.
Yeah. And so as you grow, you can't wear every single hat and you can't scale that. But here's another thing that I would say I've seen happen is that they start growing really big. And so then they start paying themselves a high salary, and then their business slows. And now their lifestyle has increased, expecting this big salary payout each month from their business. And then they can't sustain that. And so just be careful paying yourself too much as an owner right away. Have you heard the saying, owners eat last? Mm-hmm. You got to take care of your business and any people that you're working with first. And we're in business to make money. all of us know that. That's why we start businesses. Flexibility and money is what I hear most commonly. But we also want to take care of the people that are helping us get there. And so just be careful to not overpay yourself in the beginning, because there will be time for that later as you build correctly and set that money aside and, do your tax planning and things like that. If you're doing it right, there will be money and it'll grow. And then you can eventually pay yourself, probably more than what you expected in the beginning because you did it right.
Right. And that's hard too. I mean, coming from as a business owner, going from getting a consistent paycheck every 2 weeks or whatever it was to having to decide, do I take money out? Do I not? Do I just reinvest it? Do I pay my bills? I mean, it's a lot of decision making, and that can be stressful and difficult too, even in the beginning stages. But that's something that I've seen has helped too, is just taking only the necessities for a while, and reinvesting as much as I can, because the more you reinvest, the greater it's going to grow, right? You have to have money to make money.
Yeah.
I hate that, but it's true.
It's true.
And as you're making
money, another thing
Go ahead.
Another thing I'll say to that is, even if you're not going to hire a bookkeeper or hire a CPA, you need to find somebody who can give you some good tax strategies. Mm-hmm. Because that's one of the biggest things I see too, is that at the end of the year, you think, hey, I made some money last year. And then you're having to pay a 15.3%, self-employment tax on that. And you're like, okay, well, that was all my profit. So I guess I didn't make any money. And that also is not a business write-off, just so you know. Paying your tax bill is not an expense that you can charge to your business. Ugh, and so, which I know makes zero sense to me, but whatever. But the IRS says it is not a taxable expense to your business. So it doesn't take your taxable income down by paying the taxes that you owe for making money. I know. It's like this weird vicious cycle of that doesn't make any sense to me, but unfortunately that's the rules. And so if next year you had to pay $8,000 in taxes, you have to pay that out of your personal money, because even if you pay it through your business account, it just goes in as an owner distribution. And so it comes as income to you in this next tax year. And so it's like this vicious cycle. So I would just definitely from the beginning, find someone that can help you create some tax strategies. And if it's starting to look like you're going to be making more than, a net profit of $50,000, talk to someone about maybe converting to an S Corp, because that's a whole different tax strategy. But I'm not going to talk about tax strategies because, like I said, I'm not a CPA, I'm not a tax preparer, but I work very closely with a lot of them, and I did used to work in a tax office. And so there's some things that I've seen as a bookkeeper that I'm like, I have a friend, Chris, that I work with all the time. I'm like, hey, you need to talk to my friend, Chris, because he can help you get this set up. I don't know all the rules, but he can help. So definitely talking to someone to help with those tax strategies will help in the beginning as well.
That's awesome. Speaking of putting money aside for taxes, what is a guesstimate good percentage that you would suggest for putting aside every year? I mean, it probably depends on how much you make, because I know there's different brackets, but a rule of thumb, what would be your minimum that you would always put aside for taxes as a small business owner?
Honestly, 25 to 30%, because it's better to have too much sitting there than to not have enough. And so if you just take 25 to 30% of everything that you make and stuff it into that tax savings account, you should be pretty safe.
Cool.
So
that's good for me to know.
And sometimes that's hard.
Yep.
I mean, if you're working as a W-2 employee,
right,
and you calculate the amount of taxes that are taken out of your payroll, it's usually about a 25%. And so to be safe, I would say 25 to 30%, and that should keep you pretty. And it's a nice surprise then if you don't have to pay all of that and you have that to use, to either reinvest or whatever, but at least you have it sitting there so that it's not this big, oh my gosh, I got to make payment plan or put it on my credit card or whatever, Right. So if you just, honestly, preparation is the biggest key to success.
Awesome. That has been a question I've had for a long time, is how much to put aside, because I feel like everywhere you look, it's kind of a different answer. But I like that. Most of them are a lot smaller than that. But if you do hire, it's almost like giving yourself a tax return if you don't need it,
right.
Which is great.
Right.
Because I'm kind of sad. I miss tax returns. I miss that extra money coming at the end of the year.
But the funny thing is, I will say on that is that you understand that getting a tax refund means that that was just your money that you gave to the government.
Exactly, that they didn't need.
To use in their favor when you could have been using it in your own pocket, because it's just a refund of the money that you already paid in.
Right.
And so really, technically, we all want to have a zero tax refund, because that means we got to keep all of our money throughout the year.
Right.
That's where tax strategy comes into play as well.
Give yourself the tax refund without ever having to give it.
Right.
Okay. Awesome. Can you walk us through how to set up a basic system for tracking income and expenses, something simple, DIY friendly? What would you suggest for someone that can't afford a bookkeeper right now? Or maybe afford something like QuickBooks? Is there something else that you would suggest that they can do?
Honestly, just a spreadsheet. I know there's probably some free apps out there, but I'm not familiar with them, so I don't really want to speak on them because I don't know. I've heard there's one called Wave. But I've never used them, so I can't really speak to whether they're good or not. But honestly, DIY, I'd probably just do a spreadsheet. But here's the caveat to that. How many of us spend $200 a month eating out or going to Starbucks or that kind of stuff? So QuickBooks is not that expensive. It's about $50 a month for the lowest, just the most basic one.
Right.
And honestly, if you can afford $300 a month, you could hire a bookkeeper, get QuickBooks, and then you don't have to worry about any of this. And here's the switch off to that. Like, I think most people have this mindset that a bookkeeper is so expensive, I can't afford it. Mm-hmm. But how can you not afford it if they're going to keep your finances in place and you can spend those extra 10 hours a month doing your business, growing your business? So spreadsheets, the free way. But you're also going to spend all that time entering everything. You know, my lowest fee is about probably $250 a month is what I'll do, the lowest amount, because it does take time. I reconcile everything, I send you reports, all that kind of stuff. But honestly, you pay for the software and you pay for my service. If you budget $300 a month, you can get so much farther ahead because you also have that feeling of lightness because you're not stressing about your books.
Yep.
I'm giving you the information. I'm telling you this is what your profit and your loss was, and giving you that net revenue for the month. So I don't want anybody to think that bookkeepers are so expensive, because honestly, I do contract bookkeeping, which means I'm not an hourly employee that you have to pay. You don't have to pay me when I'm not working. It's a transactional thing. So I go through, I review your books, and then I give you a price. And most small businesses are under $300. So just to give that little tidbit, free, obviously, it's not really free because you're still working the hours to put the information in.
If you consider what you're paying yourself, yeah.
Exactly. And so sometimes you have to say, what do I bill my own hourly rate at? If you provide a service, what do you bill your own hourly rate at? How many hours a month are you spending tracking your finances? And would that be well spent building your business, doing what you're good at, and paying that amount to someone else? Because then it's kind of a win-win. So just wanted to throw that in there that, I don't want anyone to think like bookkeeping is actually a pretty inexpensive way to be successful in your finances.
Especially when you can hire someone like you that isn't a full-time employee. You're not having to pay benefits. You're not having to pay full-time. It's just, this is this little pocket that I need. And you have multiple clients, so you don't need full-time work from one client, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, just building on top of that a little bit, explain a little bit for those of us that don't know the bookkeeping world as well, other than putting expenses in, what kinds of things do you do? What kinds of reports do you send? Like, what do I expect if I were to hire you? What would I expect from that relationship?
Yeah, for sure. So a bookkeeper is so there's the difference between like a bookkeeper and accountant or a CPA. A bookkeeper is your day-to-day or month-to-month finances. So I'm going to be, checking your bank statements, making sure that all your transactions that came through QuickBooks match up, they're categorized correctly, and that they're reconciled at the end of the month. I don't even think my girls know what it means to reconcile a bank account at this point in their lives because they just, swipe. But there's many times that I found that, there will be an error, that the bank deposited something and then it was the wrong amount. And so then we go back in and fix it. And so just making sure that all those transactions match everything from what came into QuickBooks or came through your bank account that matches the statement. And then those are reconciled every month to make sure that they match. So then I send out a profit and loss report, which basically says, this was your sales, these were your expenses, this was your net profit. So it's, revenue minus expenses equals your net profit for the month. So I send out that report. And then I also send out a balance sheet. And a balance sheet's a little bit trickier. It's more of like your assets and liabilities, and that gives you the equity of your company. And so it takes all of your bank accounts and the balance is there, and then it takes all of your liability accounts. So say you have, a business vehicle, or you got a business loan. And so those are all tracked there. Now, the good thing is that interest can be tracked on your P&L, which is an expense. But then your asset is the depreciating asset, and all that stuff is like tax related. But so it's more like bookkeeping is more just the day-to-day monthly financial review, where you would need like a CPA or a full-blown accountant is mostly for tax strategies. And, maybe some review on big purchase later or selling your business. How can I look at that? It's more like the analytics.
Right.
But I'll be honest, my firm, we do more than just bookkeeping because of the world that I've worked in. I've been a general manager of a company. I've been a chief financial officer. I've done a lot of that stuff. And so I kind of do that just as part of some of my services, just because it's natural to me. And so, we can go from everything from just, I do your transactions and I reconcile and I send you reports, and that's your basic bookkeeping services. But we also have add-ons. Like one company I do accounts payable for, I do accounts receivable, I help post payments, I help, I run their payroll. And so there's add-on services that you can add, as you grow. And so it's just the day-to-day, so that you kind of can see, what did I spend? And you can also compare last month to this month or year to date. And you can see, wait a minute, in March, I spent $1,000 on supplies. Why in April did I have $5,000? Is there an error?
Right.
Is there, I had one client that when I took over his books, all of his revenue was going into sales tax payable. I'm like, this is miscategorized, just so you know, you don't want to be paying that.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just knowing that someone's there overseeing your day-to-day transactions so that you can have peace of mind, knowing that when I send you that profit and loss sheet, we can review it. This was your sales for the month. You might need to be a little more lean. You're paying way too much in payroll, or you're not paying enough, because I kind of know some of those percentages of where they should be in a lot of industries as well. And so just kind of a guideline. Yeah. So yeah, it's the day-to-day reconciling, making sure that your accounts all match, and just keeping you up to date on numbers. I have one client that he calls me every month and he's like, hey, are the books done? I'm like, yeah, they're done. Okay, we're going to have a financial meeting. So we'll, and I have another client that I sit in on their financial meetings. So really, it just depends on what you're looking for. Sorry, that was kind of a ramble or rant. Hopefully you got something out of that, but yeah, it's just basically the day-to-day, making sure numbers are correct and updated and reconciled at the end of the month. And then mostly I send a profit and loss and balance sheet, but it's hard because some of the small business owners, they don't really care or know how to read it. So that's why it's good to review and, hey, let's talk through this. Let me explain to you how this works. And it kind of is that aha moment of, oh my gosh, I'm actually billing my things pretty good, or holy crap, I'm not making any money.
Right.
If your net profit at the end of the month is a negative, you got to make some adjustments, because you can't go that long. Even just because you have money in the account, it doesn't mean that you're making money.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just knowing your numbers, making sure that you're caught up and reconciled, and you have the data that you need to run your business.
That's awesome. And I love that you offer so many scalable options for businesses. Those are the kind of businesses I love working with, or the ones that can start with me when I'm little itty bitty bitty and don't have a lot of money. But as I grow, I can stay with you, because I hate swapping. Like, I hate changing people. I hate changing platforms, because you get into a rhythm, you get your processes figured out, you get a relationship with your vendors and your clients and all of these things. And it's so much easier to just understand, I know how they work. And I mean, as long as they're good, which you are.
Right.
Then I just want to stay with you like forever, the whole life of my business, if I can, because it makes things so much easier on my end.
Yeah.
So love that.
Yeah.
So
and there's a level of trust that's built there.
Shannon. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Call her now, today.
And that's what's beautiful about this kind of business, is that it's not set by state lines or boundaries. Like,
right.
I'm fully remote. And so I can meet with you over Zoom like we're doing now, or we can do a phone call, or heck, I'll even come see you if you want to pay my way. I mean, I'm not opposed to that either. I love to travel. So
that was actually another question I had. I know with CPAs, there's some rules with what states you can work in and things like that. With bookkeeping, are there any kinds of restrictions? So you literally could do anybody anywhere. Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Within right now, I'm not like international.
Yes. Well, that adds a whole new complexity layer. Yes.
But yeah. But no, I used to do a guy in Chicago. I have, one in Utah, so yeah, there's no boundaries on state lines as far as that goes. Mm-hmm.
That's super nice. Okay. So next question, if someone does start working with a bookkeeper later on, like you, what can they do now to make that handoff easier and cheaper?
Honestly, everything we've talked about, tracking everything. So a lot of times people will start a QuickBooks account, and I don't know that I highly recommend doing that, just because if you don't really know what you're doing,
it can get messy.
You can just cause a lot of mess, which then I'll have to go in and clean up. And so I would probably stick to at least your first, say, 6 months in business, tracking everything on a spreadsheet, because I can then take that spreadsheet and we can do a journal entry to add those in for the year from the past, and just do it that way. Or also, if if we come on that soon, we can also a lot of times just do bank transaction downloads from your bank that will just automatically put it into QuickBooks, and I can just categorize that way. Honestly, there's almost always going to be a little bit of a cleanup if you haven't had a bookkeeper before, just because you want to get it right, and it's going to take some time for me to come in, review, analyze, and enter. So I would say budget right now, knowing that if you budgeted $300 a month, you'll probably be able to get a bookkeeper. Another thing I would say is just, if you're going to open a business account, keep that to just a business debit card and maybe one credit card. Don't run things on 14 different cards, because reconciling each of those cards is going to be an add-on charge. The amount of transactions you do is going to be an add-on charge. Now, don't be afraid of that though, because obviously you've got to have enough transactions to run your business correctly. Right. But I would minimize it to a business bank account, maybe a savings account, and a checking account. I mean, a credit card, or just a debit and a checking. But I mean, checking and savings. But definitely just minimizing the amount of things that you're running. It will help minimize also your stress. And so keeping those things on a spreadsheet, tracking your things, keeping your receipts, so that handoff is pretty easy. Mm-hmm. I mean, if it's pretty clean, it's not going to be that expensive for me to clean it up.
Right.
But I will tell you, I cleaned up a plumbing company that it cost $6,000 for the cleanup. And that was cheap because it was a full year of cleanup, which I highly discounted my price, just because I was going to take them on as a monthly client as well. So obviously I wanted to make sure that it was done right, but I still had to get paid for my services.
Yeah.
And so just keeping things clean, don't use multiple accounts, keeping business and personal separate, and then tracking things on a spreadsheet, I would say is probably the best thing you can do for the easiest handoff and the cleanest handoff.
So that brings up another question. A lot of services exist now that allow you to do multiple digital cards, so that you don't have to cancel, if one card gets leaked or something like that, you can just cancel the card for that one service and then add a new one. When you talk about additional credit cards being add-ons, would that be considered one account, or would each of those?
Yeah, because usually that all comes through the same statement. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't matter how many cards are on there, but it's all one statement to reconcile. So I consider that one card that I'm, reconciling.
Good to know, because I know I use those. I love those. Mostly because I'm a tech company, so I do a lot of subscriptions, online purchases, and things like that. So for me, that's a really good safety net to have, to be able to, cancel one and not have to cancel everything. And
you can set budgets on them and things like that.
Yeah, they're awesome. So I know those are getting popular, more popular as time goes on. So I'm just curious how that worked.
Yeah, they all usually feed through one main account that you get one statement for. And so I consider that one account that I reconcile.
Good to know. Awesome. Okay. this one is I feel like we've touched on this a little bit, but I'm just curious if you have anything else that you want to add with this question.
Okay.
The final question is there anything that I absolutely should not ever be doing myself when it comes to business finances, even if I think I'm saving money?
Bookkeeping.
I figured that would be the answer, but
also, honestly, taxes, especially as you get bigger, like you can probably do it the first year if you're pretty small and it's just kind of a side hustle that you're doing that's just, a couple extra $100 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Probably do them then. You could just do it through, the free software, TurboTax or whatever. But you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And so there could be tax benefits that you're missing because you don't know. And so honestly, I would never do my taxes myself as a business owner. And like I said, I partner with a guy that also specializes in small business. And so I refer him a lot because he's not as expensive as these big accounting firms. Accounting firms are like lawyers. I love them. They are really good and they have their purpose. But from a small business owner, most of us can't afford a couple $1,000s to do a tax return.
Right.
And so, I have a good friend, Chris, that he does a good job. He works with small businesses and he also he does personal and business taxes. And so we work together well because I'll call him and he doesn't do the add-on like every time I talk to you, I'm going to charge you $100 or $250 like a lawyer or a, accountant does. A tax firm. But I'll call him myself and I'll say, hey, this mutual client of ours, he wants to purchase a piece of equipment. How do we want to show that, And so I can bounce ideas off of him and that doesn't cost the client anything because it's a benefit to both of us.
Right.
And so 100% I would say don't do your own taxes. There's a lot of really smart people out there that have probably been able to do it. But as your business grows, there's probably tax deductions you can take. There's strategies you can have. So that would probably be the number one. Number two is obviously a bookkeeper because then you can focus on your business. But it's not unheard of as a business owner to do their own books. I know a lot of wives do it or, couple teams that, the husband does the business and the wife does the bookkeeping or vice versa even. But just making sure that you have someone who's knowledgeable doing it, even if they're doing it for free because they're your spouse, making sure that it's done right is the biggest key to being successful.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been really good for me. If no one else gets anything out of this has been great for me. Last question. If there are people watching or listening to this podcast who are like, I need you and I need you now because I am drowning, what is the best way for them to get in contact with you and to request services or chat about getting a quote, an estimate for the work? What's the easiest way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can call or text me anytime. I don't know if you want to add my information, but I can give my phone number now if you want.
Yeah, we can add it in the description as well.
In the bio or whatever, okay. My company name is Streamline Financial. And like I said, we're based in Arizona, but I will work with whoever, wherever. And also, if they find me through this podcast, I'm also doing a free 30-minute consultation just to...
Sweet.
Just have them mention it when they call me that, they saw us on here and I will do a free 30-minute consultation and go from there. So
awesome. I
would love to work with it, especially, I especially love small business. I love helping people succeed in their business. And so yeah, Streamline Financial is our company name.
Cool. We'll put all that information in the bio. So
still working with Melanie on getting a website up, but
Woohoo!
Yeah,
this is great. All these little businesses, we start networking and then we all work together and then we're like, please use them. Together. They're so good.
Right. I was formerly called M&S Consulting, but kind of transitioned, honestly, tax strategy wise. Anyway, so transitioned to Streamline Financial. And so, yeah, that's our new name. We've been in business about 5 years. So, but not as Streamline. So just so, it's, so yeah, that's how to get a hold of me. And like I said, mention this podcast and we'll do a free 30-minute consult and answer questions for you and see how we can help you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Shannon. This has been awesome and super appreciate your time today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on.